We're fortunate this afternoon to have Chris and Noah here to share how they created a self-service first mentality at Target. Please welcome Chris and Noah.
Cool, thank you guys for joining us. I know there have been like 10,000 self-service sessions here this JNUC, so we really appreciate you coming out for this one before you're free to go drink booze. So, my name is Noah Anderson, this is Chris Driscoll, we're engineers from Target. Our team is responsible for all of the specialty design and graphics, software and hardware at Target, as well as architecting the Mac platform. I do all of the Adobe software as well, and Chris is responsible for a lot of the inventory and a lot of the analytics on our team as well.
So the goals of this presentation here today, we're going to talk a little bit about how we've extended self-service beyond just software into the hardware space, how we use self-service not just front end for our packages and software, but for other applications and interfaces across the company. And then hopefully along the way, we'll show you a little bit about how you can improve the user experience, reduce some support, and improve your total cost of ownership. So Target is not unlike many of you. We have had exponential growth over the last couple of years, and we've done our best to fight down the incident ticket counts. As we look at the last couple of years and how we've kind of just evolved as a company and our platform, we traditionally started within our marketing groups, but then over the last couple of years expanded into technology, and we continue to go beyond that. From a support standpoint, we have a couple different entry points, the main one being the call center, but then that top line up there, that is our high-tech group. That's our on-site Genius bar. As you can tell, there's kind of a difference in the success rates of these two teams. So we've invested a lot of time trying to bring those numbers together. But how can you continue to improve the experience, maintain that exponential growth, without asking for any more support headcount, and without any extra dollars? So that's what we hope to talk to you today about. This is where we started with our self-service first approach. Now, as a company like Target, we have a wide variety of information sources, a wide variety of places you can go to get anything, right? Information, service requests, hardware requests, it's all just a myriad of different places. So what we wanted to do here is simplify that user experience. We want to do all the legwork behind it to improve that experience, and then along the way, we'll show you how we maintain some cost advantages. Now the concept here is pretty basic, right? We're going to make a self-service policy that's available to everybody. On the back end, we're going to trigger a script. That script is not just going to scour the user's machine, it's going to search out for external sources of information, and come back with some sort of action that's applicable to the user that triggered the policy in the first place. We're going to walk through a couple examples here for you. We're going to talk through software requests, hardware requests, and then some rights requests towards the end. The first is pretty basic, and this is software. Now, in the past, we'd only show policies for software that was applicable to somebody, but then no matter what, you're going to get service ticket calls. You're going to get questions in Slack channels of, why can't I see this? Why is this not applicable to me? You know, I want that. So what we do is we make every policy available to a user. Every single piece of software has a policy that's in self-service. What we do then is we trigger a script that'll then determine where they are in the process. Can they just have this software? Is this software already on their machine and they're just looking for an upgrade? Or do they want to uninstall it? What do they really want to do here? Does this software require manager approval? We can do all of these things behind the scenes. And then we'll prompt them up with a Jamf helper window that tells them, here's the details of your software request. Now the fun one we have with this is as you retire software, you can still leave that policy available in self-service, but then redirect them to the appropriate piece of software that we've replaced it with. And as always, we have a second button in all of our Jamf helper windows for more information. The more information button will link out to maybe a wiki article or a vendor's website, some place where that user can get more information of how it's applicable to Target or just their general workflow. Beyond software, we want to talk especially about hardware. We try to do our best to maintain a quality total cost of ownership at Target. And we look at a wide variety of aspects. Many you've probably heard about at this conference. Along the way, we've been able to maintain some pretty significant cost advantages over our Windows partners. But what we found along the way is that they like to adopt some of our approaches, and that total cost of ownership can kind of start to dwindle, or the advantage can anyways. So we're constantly looking at ways in which how we can improve that. Now, I'm guessing a variety of you could walk around your offices, and it's likely that you're going to see some keyboards, mice, adapters, what have you, just sitting in a random desk not being used. Well, Target noticed that exact same problem. And we thought maybe there's some advantage to this. How many people are actually using the devices that we give out to them? In the past, we used to give every single person everything by default, but not every person wants that. Here's some of the numbers that we came up with. This is the actual usage base of these items. 38% for a keyboard, 44% mice, and displays on top of that. The reverse side of that, that's all wasted money. They're not using it, and they're not going to return it either, because it's going to sit in a random desk, right? So what did we do? So we changed our approach. We said, when you get your machine, we'll ask you what you want. We're not going to assume that you automatically want it. But what happens if you don't get that on the day one and you need it later? We need an easy way for you to be able to request that in the future. And this is where we came up with our virtual vending machine. In self-service, we've got a whole section for all of the adapters, items, hardware request items that are applicable to your particular device, right? We have smart groups that scope which adapters are applicable to you. We don't want the wrong power adapter going to somebody with a different machine, right? On the back end, we're able to cut a catalog request directly into ServiceNow, directly for the user. And it sends all the way onto the fulfillment team. All we need to do is pop up a quick little dialog box that tells them a little bit of the details. We like to include the price so that users understand the cost of what they're asking for, because at the end of the day, we're all spending Target's dollar. They just select where they want to pick it up. The request goes on to the fulfillment team, and they can probably immediately walk down there, and that device will be available for them. This is a pretty smooth process. It's a whole bunch of work on the back end that we've been able to solve for them, but a lot of success and a lot of great feedback. Now, how we've done this, I'm going to pass it on to Noah.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. All right, so I'll do just a quick code walkthrough here for what we do for the virtual vending machine side. You don't have to take pictures of this code. It's all going to be available kind of production ready on our GitHub link at the very end of the presentation. And a lot of this stuff is just kind of pared down to show you the high-level overview of how this is working right now. So how we're doing this for virtual vending machine right now, first thing that we do is we just set a whole bunch of variables for this. We set the ServiceNow URL. How many of you guys out there are actually using ServiceNow right now? Oh, wow, that's a lot. Yeah, so ServiceNow, it's a great service manager for us at Target. We use it to collect asset data, to create incidents, to open up requested items, change requests, all that kind of stuff. So it's a super valuable tool for us. And as Chris alluded to earlier, we have a lot of API integrations with that. So yeah, first thing we do is we set the API URL that we're interacting with here. We grab the username of the user who's currently logged in, because it's a self-service policy. We know that we can cut the request with that username there. We grab the serial number of the machine, so we know what machine this peripheral is going to be associated with, and then the requested peripheral as well. So in this case, we're submitting it with an Apple Magic Keyboard. So I know Chris mentioned that we use Jamf Helper. We do for a lot of our stuff, but we actually found that Cocoa Dialog was a better approach for this. I don't know, how many of you guys have actually used Cocoa Dialog or looked at it before? Okay, so a fewer hands. So Cocoa Dialog is kind of like Jamf Helper on steroids in a lot of ways. You can just have it throw up a prompt that has a quick yes or no, or you have options for a drop-down menu where you can actually select things, and you can go through, you can throw up progress bars as part of that process as well. So it's a really powerful and extensible tool that I recommend checking out. So with that, we throw up the prompt with Cocoa Dialog, and then we've set a selections variable here. The way the Cocoa Dialog actually stores its values is in an array. So we'll go and iterate over that later. So as part of that, we just set the button response, which is going to be, OK, what are you doing? Are you canceling? Are you hitting more info? Are you hitting OK for that? And then we run it through just a quick, simple if statement that looks for, okay, did you cancel out? If you wanted more info, we go and open the link directly to Apple's website that tells you about the peripheral. But otherwise, if you're hitting order, we proceed to the next step. So the next step here is, if you're selecting order, we know that everything else on the array is just the location. So that's the next piece that we're concerned with here. We go and we grab that value. And then, as I mentioned earlier, CocoaDialog actually can throw up progress bars and stuff here too. So what we're doing here is we're creating something called a named pipe. If you've ever done any shell scripting in the past, you're probably familiar with pipes. It's not a backslash or a forward slash. It's just a straight up and down pipe that allows you to pass one command or one string output to another command to manipulate it. So for a named pipe, that actually lives somewhere on the system. So as part of that process here, we just make a pipe on the system there. And let's see. Yep. So, and then we also attach what's file descriptor 3 to that. If you've done any scripting before in the past, you'll know that file descriptor 1 and 2 is reserved for standard output and standard error. So we need to go to the next available one as part of that process. So we make that on the system, and then we connect the CocoaDialog progress bar that says, okay, we're submitting a request. This is just so the user knows that something is going on in the background if the API is taking a little bit longer to respond as part of this process. So we go through, we submit that request. Once that's done, we'll actually go through and close that pipe that's on the system. The way that ServiceNow, when you're opening up requests, returns that output, we look for an RTM number, which indicates to us that a request has been successfully transmitted. So as part of that process too, we verify the API submit was successful or not by just running this with a pipe to a cut command with the backslash as a delimiter, look for that RTM command. And then we proceed with a check at the first 3 letters to make sure it's the expected response. If it is, we show a CocoaDialog prompt with the next steps for how they can pick this up, or if they ordered it remotely, when it's going to be delivered to them. Otherwise, we give them information on next steps for troubleshooting. So this is just a brief video overview of how this process works. So this is self-service here. We go down to the vending machine. You can see we've got all these options available to us. And we're going to go ahead and order the magic keyboard. So that goes through and executes. Yep, they get the prompt. Go and select the pickup location. Go ahead and hit order. There's that progress bar dialog box. All right, and the request is submitted. They get that RTM number, and it includes all the next steps for where they can expect to get that peripheral.
So we don't roll anything onto target without measuring the results of it. As you can see from this graph, this is the results of the number of people who have run policies run out of our vending machine. So we've had a lot of success with this. The cool part about this as well is circling back with the call center and reviewing incident ticket volumes. Anything that does actually get called on that we haven't already educated individuals to use the vending machine on, it's very easy for the call center to guide them to the vending machine and to order what they need to do, right? This form in ServiceNow is buried, right? Good luck searching ServiceNow to find the exact form that you need, much less finding or knowing that you have to search ServiceNow to find that. We've now simplified that entire user interface for them. But where do we go from here? So once we had our vending machine rolled out, we wanted to expand upon that. And the number 2 policy that's ever used in our self-service is when's my hardware refresh? Because everybody wants to know when they're going to get their new machine. In the past, we've always returned the year that their machine is up for refresh. This year, we surprised our users a little bit by providing them a new prompt that says your machine's up for refresh. Would you like to proceed with that process? Using the exact same API call with ServiceNow, we're able to pass along the appropriate information and immediately cut them a request for a new machine. All they need to do is tell us what type of machine they wanted and where they wanted to pick it up. So it's been pretty cool. Now, beyond hardware requests, we've expanded into rights requests. And this is a lot more tricky because good luck finding the information that you need to get this, to get the appropriate process that you need to follow based on your platform you're on at Target. Rights requests by default at Target, we don't give everyone LAR by default, and USB rights are locked down now. The instructions are an internal wiki. Depending upon what platform you are, you need to either raise your requests in My Access or in ServiceNow. And then fulfillment processes are completely different depending upon what platform you're on. But what do? We applied our self-service first approach to this. We have one self-service policy. It triggers a script that'll review where you might be in the process already within Jamf Pro, as well as ServiceNow, and then we'll take action accordingly with where you might be. And I'll have Noah walk you through how that works.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so the way that we're locking down USB rights now within Target, we have a configuration profile that's just set to restrict all mass storage devices here. And that's deployed to all machines, all endpoints at Target right now. So if you're allowed to get USB rights, that means that you get added to a part of an exemption group that gets that configuration profile removed from your machine. So the way that we went about doing this in the back end is we put together 2 new extension attribute fields under the user tab here. So one is an authorized for USB, which is just a string value. It includes either the RTM, which is the opened request, or the TSK number, which is the fulfilled request. So we can go back and reference that for the user if they're going and running that in self-service and they want to see where in the process they are. The second thing that we added to self-service is a USB grant date. This is a date field that allows us to scope out a smart group based on the date of when the USB access was actually provisioned. We have an existing smart group that says, okay, between 365 days ago to 0 days ago, this is everybody who's allowed USB rights. So it's super easy to scope based on people's user profiles in Jamf Pro. So any machine that they log into moving forward, if it's a refresh machine, they have USB rights out of the box as long as they're within that 1-year period. So again, I'll take you through some code. Apologies, I know that this is really small. Those of you in the back that can actually look at the monitors, it might be a little more helpful. But again, all of this stuff is available in our GitHub with kind of an architectural diagram for how we architect this stuff as well. So since this is a little more complicated, we actually threw everything together in functions in Bash. So once we set our first function, we actually call the next function in the path. So based on how that workflow goes, we have a whole bunch of conditional statements to say, if this criteria is met, then proceed with this function. Otherwise, go with this function. So it's super easy for readability perspective, as readable as Bash is, and pretty easy to troubleshoot if you have any problems with it. So first thing that we do here, we set everything for the JSS interaction here, the API address, the username and the password. And then for ServiceNow interaction again, we've got an authorization key and a bearer token to interact with that. And then same as before, we grab the username of the logged in user to actually cut the USB request. So next, we go and, since the USB rights are governed according to smart user groups, we need to ensure that the user record actually exists in the JSS. So we execute a quick API call to check. If it exists, we check for an existing request, which will be the next function here. If it doesn't exist, we run a recon. There we go. Yep. So if they don't exist, we run recon with the end username flag attached to it, which basically just runs a recon and creates that user record and associates that user record with the logged in machine. After that, we route to the first time request function. And then the next function looks for an RTM or a TSK for the first user extension attribute field. And allows them to either check up on the status of the request or allow them the ability to re-request. So this slide is pretty ServiceNow specific. There's actually no interaction with the Jamf Pro API as part of this. But the ServiceNow responses that you get if you've worked at that in the past, they're not super intuitive. There are actually 2 different fields. There's status and state. Which might show like closed complete, closed incomplete, fulfillment, work in progress, a lot of things that don't mean much to the end user. So what we decided to do is we actually took those values, we created the API for ServiceNow as part of that, run it through some, again, pretty ugly Bash to get the responses here, echo out that statement just for our visibility with logging, and then as part of that process, we actually run that through a case statement. So as part of that with case, it's really, really nice. If you haven't used case before in Bash, it's kind of like if-then, but you have multiple prongs where you can say, okay, if it looks like this, then do this, or this, pretty much as you want here. So, and the thing that's really nice with case is I found out when I was scripting this, is that you can pass along 2 or more values separated by a delimiter of your choice. So in this case, we just use an underscore here to pass along the status and the state, because you could be in one state that would mean a lot of different things in ServiceNow, or one status that would mean a lot of different things in ServiceNow. But we actually need both of those to pass along to the user so they know what's happening here. So we feed that in, and then we set a variable for RTM state that shows up as part of that Jamf helper prompt later on that says, OK, your request has been rejected because your manager rejected it, or it's still a work in progress, or it's been fulfilled complete. So this is a much easier way than having the user go out to a ServiceNow page directly themselves to tell them exactly where the process broke down or where they're at. So next, we set the function to actually re-request USB writes. It's a little bit different than requesting for the first time. So since the provision date of the USB grant is stored on the JSS, we pull that down, run that through some one-liner bash math with a bunch of date commands and expression commands. If you have any questions on that stuff, I'd be more than happy to oblige after this presentation. And then determine how many days until expiration. The way the date values are stored in the JSS, it's in year, month, date format. So the user might have a difficult time kind of figuring out, OK, how many months or days do I actually have until these rights expire? So we spit it out in just an easy to consume. OK, you have 30 days until rights expiration. You have 300 days until rights expiration, which is a little easier for them to understand. So if rights are expired, we tell them that, and a Jamf helper prompt comes up to say, OK, you can re-request rights here. Otherwise, if the rights aren't expired, we show them how many days until expiration, give them the opportunity to re-request now. For a lot of folks, we find that if they're going to be on vacation for a long period of time, they're going on maternity leave, sometimes they want to make sure that their rights are ready when they come back. So we give them that option even if they have something like 100 days left. The next function that we have here is requesting USB for the very first time. It includes the username variable that we previously set, and submits the notes automatically. So there's actually nothing for the end user to fill out as part of that process. They just click one button, and it goes through. And as we did previously with the vending machine, we grab that response from ServiceNow when we're issuing for the first time to make sure that we actually get an RTM as part of that response. If the API is successful, we get that information. We report back to the user to say, great, this is your RTM number. You can follow up with your manager to make sure that they approve it. And if something goes wrong, we give them next steps. Usually it's kind of a try again, or you can submit manually, and information to escalate to us if they have continued problems. If everything looks good there, we can go ahead and update their Jamf Pro record. We just do an easy API call that we're setting this function for here. We're just writing directly to that user, and here's just a little bit of XML that we include along that writes directly to that extension attribute field that adds that request number in so they can request that later. And then finally, the last function that we're setting here is just notifying the user. So it's just that Jamf helper prompt that says, OK, here's your RTM. Here's your next steps. Go talk to your manager right now. You can get that approved right away, and then you're good to go. So since we're setting everything with functions, calling the next function, calling the next function, when we actually get to the main body of the script, it just looks like this. So we echo start. We go in, set the variables, and then the workflow that I laid out earlier that just either has the happy path or different conditionals based on the state of the machine or the user. It'll go through and address all of that. So for the body of the code, that's super easy to look through and pretty aesthetically nice. So this is a video demonstration of what this process actually looks like in practice at Target. So USB writes are featured on our main page. Users going through requesting for the very first time. Goes through executes. All right, we tell them we don't have a record of USB writes request. Go through and request for the very first time. That'll go through and say, OK, USB writes were requested and submitted. Here's your RTM number. Follow up with your manager. Let's say that our user is a little impatient, wants to know the status right away. So they go back, check status, queries Jamf Pro, and says, oh, OK, it actually says that your rights haven't been approved by your manager. You really need to go talk to them. So exit out of that. A little time passes. The user talks to their manager, gets it approved. And then they go and check their status just to guarantee that it's actually working. So it runs and says, OK, your USB rights are valid for another 365 days. Does that pull from Jamf Pro and is super seamless and super slick in getting back to the user in that way. So once again, Chris will talk to you about the feedback that we've collected.
So we locked down all the rights across our entire environment, and this graph will show you the results over the 2-month period. There's a number of policy runs that we saw. The best part about this entire feedback is there were 2 tickets called into our call center. One where, how do I request USB rights? And the second was, what's the status of my rights? And the easiest part was the call center just needed to say, run the policy again, because we could tell them exactly where they were in the process. So this has been hugely successful for us. So summarizing a little bit of the self-service first approach that we've had here is you put the user first, right? That's been a very common theme across this conference. You simplify that user experience. No, in this particular case, you go to self-service first. On the back end, our team is going to work really, really hard to make sure that we've mapped out that process for you to make that easy. And similar to our hardware discussions, we can maintain some cost advantage along the way. So that's our self-service first approach at Target.
Oh, and Chris is so proud of this slide here. All the self-service icons, yep. So this is the Git repository link that we have here. It includes the USB rights stuff that we talked about, the vending machine code as well. It's genericized, so you can go in and try plugging that into your own environment, and a couple of other things that Target does with their self-service as well.
Questions?
Cool. Thanks, guys.
So I hate to ask a question that I wouldn't answer myself, but on the basis of one of those last slides, it looks like you've got just shy of 900 requests for USB rights. How does that compare to the environment? Right. So is that most, close to all, half?
It's a percentage.
Okay.
It's a smaller percentage, yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't give you an exact number,
Right.
but I would say that, yeah, everybody's aware of it, of the policy.
Okay.
Because there was a wide marketing campaign to tell everybody in advance that we were locking down their USB rights, and the easiest way to get it was to go to self-service.
Yeah, and we found that the breakdown of a lot of users, I mean, we've got a lot of folks who are developers that use our products, in addition to folks in marketing as well. I mean, I'm sure that that's probably the case for you, that a lot of folks who are in marketing and creative disproportionately use USB rights over somebody like developers.
Just quick question. Are you utilizing the integration tools for ServiceNow and Jamf? And if you are, which one are you using? Or you're not using them at all?
We are not. Nope.
Okay.
All of the stuff that we wrote is just APIs that have been exposed by our IT service management
Right,
enablement
just-
team. Yep,
All
and then we're able to connect with that directly.
Okay, cool.
So I signed paperwork with ServiceNow yesterday, so I'm like just figuring out what we're gonna do. So this is super interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
So why, so we're talking about building out like the service catalog in ServiceNow as well. Do you have this information like in both places? Because we also have like a PC environment where they don't have self-service, unfortunately. So like, do you guys have these catalog items that are in the vending machine also available? And if so, is it referencing those catalog items? Like a little bit more about how that works.
So the catalog, it's a single catalog request
Okay.
in ServiceNow that we're calling. Our ServiceNow teams expose that particular form to
Okay.
us, and then we pass it along the values that we want populated in that field.
Okay. And then, could a user also go to like?
They could.
Okay, cool. And request
Yep.
the same things.
Yep, and that's where our users, our Windows users are going today.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
One of my favorite things is peeking at other companies' self-service at JNUC, so that was really cool. But I wanted to ask if it had sort of a snowball effect of the other partner groups you work with, kind of considering self-service to incorporate other things. Do you have a self-service mentality, and has it kind of been infectious to the groups you work with, bringing solutions to self-service instead of elsewhere?
I would say the biggest win associated with that is our Windows team then decided to roll out something similar for refresh for themselves. So they saw our experience and decided to bring it to their platform, which we thought was super cool. But yeah, we're always engaging with teams that have like larger tool chains, that they want that they want installed or updated or wherever, and automating as much as we can with those particular teams.
All right, thank you.
Hi, awesome stuff, by the way. So we became a ServiceNow shop about a year ago. Before that, we were using a system that I called Email Now, which replaced the system before that, which was Knock on Our Door Now. So it's been a little bit of a shift getting our users to kind of get into that confidence to be able to, like, you can actually do this yourself now. What was the shift like immediately kind of getting people into self-service, and now is it something at Target where people don't even think twice about going into self-service? Is there still any kind of resistance going on?
So the culture at Target, for the most part, is we have a very strong community within our Mac users on Slack. So it's a full public channel. Anybody can help anybody. And as soon as you can show one person or two people how easy it is to do something, they're quick to help the next person. So in that sense, it snowballs the message, right? And we don't see as many as we used to repeat questions, because now it's people are starting to check, or they'll just check with their neighbor before they post out to Slack, and then we just see adoption.
Right. In addition to that, I mean, it wasn't just kind of word of mouth snowball adoption. We did publicize this. We wrote a blog post and made announcements in Slack and updated our wiki pages and everything, so people knew if they're looking for that information, that self-service is the place to go.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Hey guys, so as mentioned before, it's really cool checking out other people's self-services, and what you guys are doing looks really great. We're getting ready to switch over from a previous ticketing system over to ServiceNow, so I'm like definitely getting the gears kind of turning for the ways that I can get this kind of tied in. As far as getting tickets and everything created with it for the purchase requests, when you're getting user information, I guess when y'all have self-service deployed, are y'all have that tied in with like an LDAP service for getting the username and having that automatically generate the ticket for that, or how is that actually working?
Yeah, yep. So a little bit of the code walkthrough here. You can actually just run an easy bash command or Python command to grab the logged in user.
Okay.
So, yep. So since every user is going to be probably generating this for themselves with their logged in user session, we go and grab the existing console user and then submit that as part of the ServiceNow request.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll be up here if you guys have any more questions.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.